Okay, so in this video, I'm going to be demonstrating three very key techniques that I have done independent videos on in the past, but I'm putting it all together into a tutorial that teaches you how to create waves. The very first technique is going to be the shape morphing or shape tweening technique, which allows you to convert one shape into another. The second one is going to be the creation of visual cycles, and not necessarily for the creation of creating continuous loops. There's another big video on that. If you just kind of look back in the history of my channel, you'll find it. But I wanted to be able to put everything together. So visual cycles is basically drawing things in a way that they end the same way that they started, so that when you do animate them, they just automatically create endless loops. And thirdly, I'm going to be showing you once again the masking technique. So when you put all these three things together, you can end up with some very sophisticated things, even though technically you're not doing that much. So stick around. This is making waves. Let's begin by opening up Flash, or also known as Adobe Animate. We're going to create our video at 1920 by 1080. To start with, and one of the tricks that I'm going to do with this is that since we're working with vector images, we don't have to really work that big in most cases. We don't necessarily have to work at 100%. So once the document is open, I'm going to click on this little link icon to link the width versus the height in terms of the aspect ratio, being able to maintain it. And I'm just gonna reduce the width of this, maybe down to, I don't know, 640, just nice and small, you know. So we end up with a 640 by 360 image. Now the aspect ratio wise, it's exactly going to be the same as a 16 by 9 image. So when we export it, or if we need to resize it, we can always resize it to that level. So okay, so that was one of the things. And you don't have to do this. You can work at 100%. You can work at whatever aspect ratio or dimensions you want. So let's begin by taking a look at the shape morphing technique. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to draw this shape, maybe that big, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go ahead and resize this using my properties panel to match the size of the screen. So 640. And I'm going to align it to the 0 axis, and I'm going to make this nice and even. That's at 162. I'm going to put it at 150. I just like having stuff nice and even. So with this being like that, I'm just going to resize it. Hold down the Alt key so it only resizes from the bottom as I drag. And it doesn't have to be perfect, so I'm just going to leave it there as long as it's outside of the area. So now we have a base shape. Now I'm going to go ahead and color this maybe some kind of bluish shade. You paint it whatever color you want. So here's where the magic happens. Okay, now I'm going to lock this. I'm going to show you a quick demonstration of what we're doing. Shape tweening or shape morphing is basically animating a shape going from one state to the other. This is how most basic vector-based animation tools work. It's one of the most basic functions you can ever get in any program. So here I have this this shape on frame 1. Then I'll go to frame 30, insert keyframe, and on frame 30 I'm going to draw the on frame 30, I'm going to draw this square here. So I just tell Flash, between those two keyframes, create a shape tween. So basically all the in-between frames are interpolated for me using the computer, basically best guessing what it should look like. So according to the computer, somewhere in the middle, that shape looks like that. So we end up with an animation that looks like that. Okay, and there's all sorts of like very advanced things that you can do with that. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of that. Just wanted to kind of give you a quick demonstration in case you weren't familiar with what shape morphing is, or shape tweening. So now you know. So we're going to do the same thing with this basic shape. It's just basically a rectangle, right? So I'm going to go to frame 30, and you can put your keyframe anywhere you want. But what we're doing is, actually, you know what? I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to go ahead and distort this a little bit. I'm going to hold down the Alt key as I drag various points from this. So basically, if you just hover your mouse over a shape, notice how the cursor kind of changes state. That little curvature icon, that means that you can pull on that shape and do, you know, that kind of stuff. But if you do that while holding down the Alt key, you're going to get that little icon, but when you pull it, it's actually adding a point. So I'm going to put one there, I'm going to put one there, maybe one there, maybe one there, and one there. It doesn't matter. So now I can come back and hover my mouse around, just kind of excuse me, just kind of adjust it. And of course, you don't have to make straight on jagged edges. I mean, you can go back and like adjust the curvature of these shapes, you know, any way you want. So if I want to do this, I can do that as well. So let's go ahead and leave it like that for now. Now you can leave them jagged. Personally, I use the jagged method. Some people like maybe a more curved type of wave. You can use a combination. It doesn't matter. So basically now what we're going to do is we're going to duplicate this keyframe. We're going to go to frame 30, right click there, select insert keyframe. Basically what that does is it takes whatever was on frame 1, the last keyframe, and it duplicates it over on frame 30. So I have the same exact shape. So we're going to morph this shape into this shape, okay? And this is where we're going to get a little bit tricky, okay? Create shape tween. So since we're morphing the same shape into another shape that's pretty much exactly the same, visually nothing actually happens. So what we're going to do is go back to frame 1, and this is where it gets a little advanced. Not everybody knows to do this, so this is a little bit more of an advanced technique. Okay, so go to frame 1. While everything is selected, you press Control Shift H. This adds what's called a shape hint, and notice how it has the letter A on it. So we're going to add this point here. It's kind of like a little pin. So that's going to be A. We're going to do it again. Control Shift H. B, we're going to put it on that corner. Control Shift H. C, we're going to put it on this corner. Oops. And Control Shift H, we're going to put it on that last corner right there. A, B, C, and D. And notice that how those points kind of snapped to those little vector points. And that's because I had the little magnet tool turned on the tools panel there. So I'm going to go to the second frame, and I'm going to realign these. Okay, so that's my D shape right there. Oops. That's my D. I'm going to place it there. Notice that once I place it, it turns green. That means that it's locked in with the other D hint. C was over here. B was over there, and A is over here. So we still end up with the same exact thing because we're basically matching the points to the same points where I want in the corner. That's basically because I'm telling Flash, I'm telling an Animate not to move those points. Those points should be anchored at all times. That's basically what I'm doing there. Now I'm going to come back here, and I'm going to add one more shape hint. I'm going to add two more. Control Shift H. This is a point E. Let's place it here. Control Shift H. We're going to place one here, and that should be more than enough. Okay, so basically now what we're going to do is we're going to tell Flash I want this point to basically morph into this point here, and I want this one to morph into somewhere in here maybe. All right, so let's go to that frame 30. Okay, so that's EF. Let me make sure I got it correctly. So that's EF up there. And so we're gonna take E, F, maybe like that. Let's see. Yeah, that should do it. So this is going to morph into this, and this is going to morph into that. That's more than enough usually. So let's kind of play the animation. So now we have something that looks like that. Alright, so let's make it a little bit smoother because this is just kind of doing its own random thing. So let's add one more shape hint. Let's see what happens. Control-Shift-H. That gives us point letter G. We're going to place it there. We're going to go to the last keyframe. In G, we're going to have it move it up there. Let's take a look at it. It's a little bit smoother. Okay, that seems to do the trick. So because it starts exactly the same way that it ends, the result is when you loop it, you end up with a sort of a wave system there that just kind of loops forever. Okay, so that's the general gist of how to make a wave. Now, you can simplify it more. The more simplified it is, the better results you're going to get, of course. So, let's go ahead and move on. Let's leave this alone for now. This is more of an extreme example. What we're going to do now is we are going to kind of let me see here. I'm going to simplify this a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to maybe just kind of alter these shapes a little bit. Let's see what happens when I do that. So you feel free to play around with it, you know, so you can get the look that you're going for. I'm going to take this, copy, paste it here. So I want something that looks more like this for this example. All right, that's a little extreme, of course. You know, you might want to make these points a little smaller, more thinner, you know, more not so high. But because I'm doing it as a demonstration, I want to have it a little bit on the extreme side. Okay, so you can have that exaggerated effect, so you can kind of better visualize what we're doing here. Now, the thing about shape tweens, Control Alt, well, let's save this. Before something happens and we lose our file. Alright, so now we're going to publish it. Control Enter will basically render out the movie to the same place where it's saved. So this is kind of what our movie looks like right now. All right. Now the thing about shape morphing or shape tweening in CrazyTalk Animator itself is that it's one of the features that CrazyTalk Animator doesn't really support. So when we bring it in here, we end up with something that looks like that. Okay. So it's not very impressive. So what we need to do is, because we want this animation to be visible inside of CrazyTalk, we are going to select this animation, right-click, and convert to frame-by-frame animation. Here you have the a choice. Keyframe each frame. That means it basically converts everything into single image frames. You do every other frame, that's basically on 2s, on 3s, on 4s, or custom. So you choose where you want the keyframes to be placed. Now, Ideally, I mean, you want this to be as smooth as possible, but not so much that you are going to bog down the system. I mean, CrazyTalk Animator is not exactly a good animation tool for keeping everything optimized. Okay, you have to really put some effort in there, because the more stuff you add to the program, the more it's going to bog down, the more system resources are going to be used. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to have it do every other frame. Okay, we're not going to miss one in between frame. So here I have one. I basically turned it into like a 15 frame sequence by removing all the keyframes in between. I'm going to get rid of that last one manually, and I'm going to extend that. Remove frames. Okay, so basically I've reduced it to a technically what's a 15 frame frame by frame sequence, and it doesn't really lose much in terms of quality, okay, because basically each keyframe is being exposed for 2 frames. And in terms of optimization, I mean, I'm using 15 frames as opposed to 30, so that's a 50% optimization ratio right there already as it is. So the more optimized your stuff is, your props, the better it's going to work inside of CrazyTalk. The more stuff you'll be able to add, especially with something like this. You're adding waves, so most likely you're going to want to add multiple waves to create the final effect, right? So it's kind of an important thing. So I'm going to go ahead and control enter to publish my movie, and that movie is being placed over here on my desktop, which is where I saved it. So alright, so now we're gonna import that SWF file that we created directly into CrazyTalk Animator, and we have something that looks like this. Okay, if we hit play, you can see that the animation just kind of plays on a loop there, and it's fine, it's great, that's what we want. So we can actually stretch it out, do all sorts of things with it. Before we do any of that though, we're going to go ahead, and because it's a vector shape, we're going to take advantage of the render style feature. I'm going to go into composer mode and go to the vector grouping option. Make sure select same color is selected, click on the first one, and just apply a render style to it. It doesn't really matter what it is. Usually for everything, I usually use skin 1 if it's just a prop, because it also lets me use some of my personal stylizers that I've created. So let's get out of there. So now we have this wave color here, and don't be surprised if the default color changes on you, because there's also little artifacts. You know, CrazyTalk doesn't really read very well, it reads them as different colors sometimes, and it just averages out whatever the color in between is. So that's fine, you know. It's just something you have to learn to live with. So we have this this shape, I mean this prop, and it's fully animated, and it's a cycle, you know, and you can like squeeze it in if you don't like those waves being too sharp, too high up there. You can hold down the control key and put your mouse over this little in and out arrow and just push it in. That'll duplicate it, and we'll stretch it out even more, except this time we'll go into the render style thing and just kind of reduce the brightness a little bit. Okay, we're going to create another one and reduce the brightness even more. We're going to create another one and reduce the brightness even more. Now we're going to have to probably change the arrangement of this. Oops. Yeah. Let's kind of go back here real quick, because there we go. We're going to select that one, reduce the brightness, maybe 5 seems fine. Let's go to the next one, maybe a little bit darker, maybe a 10 or 11, that's fine. Let's do that one in the end. We're going to reduce it maybe to a 15. So we have various degrees of brightness, and of course we can adjust our positioning. Maybe do a little bit of rotation shifting. All right. And so far we've managed to do this with just a single prop, and this is how you should do everything, with as minimal objects as possible. The more stuff you add to the program, the more bogged down it gets. You know, your frame rate. Right now this thing is playing at 148 frames per second, you know, as far as the rendering. That's pretty damn good. As long as it doesn't go below 30, we're in good shape. So right now these you know, it looks very complex, but you know, technically it's actually very, very simple. And I don't like the way that this thing is, because this is not moving. So you know, you're going to use your creative judgment in how you frame your stuff. So basically we're going to take that one and maybe move it out of the way a little bit, you know, just so it's not on screen so obvious. Okay, so now we have something that looks like this. Okay, so on the surface, this is basically, you know, a basic wave, and depending on the animation style, the type of production you're doing, this might be good enough. You know, you can take excuse me, you can take you know, your assets. You can duplicate those and even flip them, you know. Oh, hold down the control key when you do that. Let's see, animation, which is mirror those. So now we have some counter motion. And we'll take those and just kind of, you know, mess around with that. Hit play. Alright, that's not too bad. Let's bring it higher a little bit. Let's hit play. Let's see how it happens. So, you know, that doesn't look too bad. You can get a lot of stuff done that way. So and of course it is a 3D placement, so you know, you can have objects coming from behind, from in. Now you can make full use of your 3D space. That's what the beauty of this type of technique is. Not just the placement, but also the way it works, you know. So you know, I'm sure that this is already generating some creative possibilities for you. That's the point of this whole thing. Next, yeah, it looks pretty cool. So next, what I'm gonna do is we're gonna move into the next technique, which is making use of cycles. You know, basically, you can make all sorts of different cycles. All right. For this one, I'm gonna open up a new project, and I'm gonna make it at 500 by 500. Just so I can have like a general square area to work with. And cycles are motion cycles. I mean, you can do motion cycles, you can do visual cycles, or you can do a combination of both. I mean, there's all sorts of types of cycles that you can play with. In this case, we need a visual cycle, something that's static, but visually it starts the same way that it ends. So I'm going to create just like a basic shape here. I'm going to make a lighter version of this blue color. Maybe a little bit close towards white, and so I can see better, I'm gonna get the background color of my flash stage to be like maybe a little bit like a shade of gray or something, just so I can better distinguish what I'm painting. Now I'm just kind of drawing some garbage here. And you can be as elaborate with this stuff as you want. I mean, this is only for demonstration purposes, so I'm not too worried about being perfect. You know, this should be enough for your imagination to kick in and fill in the rest. I'm going to take this shape here, and I'm going to turn that into a symbol in Flash. I'm going to call it, I don't know, foam. And I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm just going to bring it at the bottom, place it in a way that I can kind of okay. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go in here, I'm just going to adjust that little tip there so it kind of blends in. And maybe take this and extend it out this way so it just kind of blends in with that. And I'm going to go into, it's the same symbol, I'm just kind of making it so that it loops into itself from a visual perspective. Alright, so technically this symbol looks like that, but I'm placing it in a way that it kind of blends in with itself. Now the trick to this is that we're going to take those two symbols and merge those into one symbol. So foam 2. So now we have this thing. I'm going to bring this one well, for demonstration purposes, I'm going to take basically what we're doing is we're going to place this foam somewhere like that, and we're going to go to like maybe frame 30 or something. So keyframe, and on that 30th frame we are going to, I'm going to turn on the onion skin so we can see the previous frame. So I'm just going to move this up to the point where it goes. You see how that onion skin is right there? I need to place this exactly right there, so it's basically animating itself, going from here to here. Right click, classic tween. Alright, so it's basically just animating up, but it's animating up in a way that the little that segment ends up exactly where that other segment is. So from a visual standpoint, from a static standpoint, this is a cycle, this is a loop. The portion up here is exactly right here, so this loops into this. Now from a motion standpoint, the thing is just going up, but it's stopping at the same exact spot where this was. Therefore it creates a seamless loop when we loop it together. Now if we hide the edges, we'll create a new layer. Now, because obviously, you know, when we hit play, I mean, you can see what's happening. When we hit play, I mean, you can see how it just kind of turns off and on and stuff like that when you see the edges, right? And obviously, we don't want that. But if we hide it, we're going to basically put just something here and maybe hide that. When we hide those edges, the stuff in the middle, and let me make this a little bit longer. So basically the stuff that you do see in between, that's just kind of looping over and over in like a seamless cycle almost. Wonder why this is turning on and off. That's because of that last frame. Okay. You know, maybe we need to add a third one. In most cases, you can get away with just 2 frames, but in this one, I think because of the way I'm doing it, I'm going to have to add a third one, and that's still not that bad. I'm just going to go in here. There. So when we do it, now we have a perfect cycle. So let's look at it again with the edges hidden away. We're just gonna mask this out real quick and just kind of play it like that. So what you can see there is we just have a series of lines that are just kind of flowing up, never ending, forever. And that's kind of what we want, okay? So that was the animation cycle portion. So now we've covered up 2 major techniques. One was the shape morphing technique. Now we've completed our visual cycles technique. Now the last one is the masking technique, okay? So we're gonna take this animation cycle and we are going to mask it. I'm going to just flat out I'm gonna go ahead and recreate this. I'm gonna take this, cut it, go in here, and basically I'm just gonna draw something. It doesn't really matter what it is, so I can convert that into a symbol. And I'm going to go inside of that, I'm going to delete that, and I'm going to paste it. Paste in place. So we have this. Alright. So basically, maybe I want from here, maybe on frame, let's start with frame 60 for now. Insert keyframe. And we're going to do the same thing. We're going to turn on the onion skin, and we're just going to animate it so that it pushes up into itself until the next cycle comes up. That's about right. Insert, create classic tween. So we have something that looks like this. All right. And maybe let's reduce it down to, oh, let's leave it there. Screw it. You know, you can adjust the timing any way you want. You get the idea. So we have that. And so basically we have something that looks like this. Now this is not going to be playing because right now it's basically a movie clip symbol. When you publish it, that movie clip symbol is going to kick in, and you're able to see it just fine. If you want to see it within the runtime area, then convert it to a graphic symbol, and now you can scrub through it. There's different benefits to what you should use and when. In fact, I am going to, since I created this as a 60 frame sequence, I'm going to go all the way here and I'm going to extend it to the 60th frame. That way you see the full cycle for that animation. I'm going to take this one, copy frames, go here, paste frames, and now I have a full cycle that kind of goes all the way to the end there. So I'm gonna basically leave. I'm gonna take this. I'm going to put it on top. I'm going to be using this as a mask. So what I do here is I right click on this layer, select mask, and now take a look at what happened. Only the areas where that shape is located is being used to display the bottom layer. So now I have something that looks like that. So only the stuff that's inside of that shape is being animated. I'm going to place a new layer way at the bottom here. And on that layer, I'm just going to draw, I don't know, like just like this, right, real quick. That way you can kind of see it better. And let's take a look at it in the loop. So we have something that looks like that. Now, because it's that mask layer, it has different frames. That wave kind of moves around, right? So that's kind of cool. So let's change the color of the background layer. Now, obviously, I could duplicate this, put it at the bottom, and I'll have something that looks like that, right? But why do I not want to do that? I don't want to do that because I'm unnecessarily adding an extra 30 frames to this animation. That's already bogging down my system by 50%. So we got to avoid it as much as possible, right? So we're just going to basically sample maybe. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna create a fancy gradient color. I'm going to use this blue here. Actually, hang on. Go to color. I'm going to choose a linear gradient. For my first color, I'm going to select this one. For my second color, I'm going to create that one again. But on this one, wait a minute. I'm going to bring down the brightness. And on this one, I'm going to increase the brightness if I can. If I can't, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it closer to white. There we go. So we have like a gradient that kind of looks like that. Maybe a little bit more extreme. Maybe a little bit darker, just to go a little bit more extreme here. And maybe push that brightness a little bit towards that top. Alright, so we have this gradient color, okay? I'm going to go ahead and use that. I'm going to get rid of this previous one. So I just have this gray shape here. It's kind of ugly. But I am going to paint it with this newly created gradient color. And I just kind of messed it up. Let's see here. Paint. There it is. So I'm going to take that, just kind of adjust the direction of my gradient. Let's see. And gradient colors is, to a certain extent, something that CrazyTalk Animator does support, to a certain extent. Okay, so we have something that looks like that, and we are going to add this solid shape to the mask. Okay, so that way when we add it to this masking group and we lock it down, we have something that looks like this. Now the benefit to this is that this entire sequence is being powered by this one shape. All right, so we have something like that. So already we're going back to being pretty damn optimized. Okay, so how do we make this effect a little bit better? Okay, we're going to play around with some layers, and at this point, I mean, you just get creative with whatever you want. I'm going to go in here, grab the free transform tool. Maybe duplicate this a couple times. Offset it so it's not all weird. And since it's a gradient, it's a graphic symbol, we can actually tell it to start on a different frame, so it's not like perfectly synchronized with the other one. We tell this one to start maybe right here, so that when we play it, we have stuff that looks like that. Okay, I'm gonna hit Control Enter, and let's take a look at what that looks like inside of CrazyTalk. I see a little bit of popping there, so let me make excuse me. Maybe push it in this way. Let's see what that looks like. Maybe this little glob right there is a little harsh, so bring it out more. Let's see what that looks like. It's a little bit more bearable. And of course you can animate more, put more animation into this, you know. I can go in here, distribute to layers. You can do all sorts of animation. You can even go in here and do like frame by frame stuff. You know, this is basically all you, all right? Oops, not F8. That's to create graphic symbols. F6. So I'm going to put two in-betweens. This one, I'm going to animate them going this way. And I don't want them to be too synchronized, so we're going to do this. And so basically it's going to animate from here to here, and then it's going to go back, and then it's going to do another animation here, F6, and maybe just kind of go down here with some extreme movement. Alright, so now we'll get the whole thing and add that movement, create classic tween. So we end up with stuff that looks like that. Okay, very random. Alright, so when we publish it, Control Enter, that movie is automatically going to go to wherever my source file is saved. Alright, so that's on my desktop right now. So if we go back to CrazyTalk, I'm going to get rid of all of this and drop the new project, which looks like this. Now you'll notice that you'll have a lot of extra space here that you kind of have to work around, and that's because there's, you know, there's data back here. It's just being masked. So even though it's not there visually, it's really there. So CrazyTalk doesn't have a way to discern where the mask really is. So it just kind of makes a little thing for the whole thing. So that's kind of a little bit of a drawback, but it still works. You just have to kind of, you know, work around that. So you have something that looks like this now. Of course, because it's already a gradient, it's already going to have its own little separation of colors when you do duplicate this type of stuff. I'm going to see if I can duplicate it from back here. I don't think it'll let me. Let's go here. And we have to kind of work around this whole mask thing because, you know, we have all this space here, so this little thing gets put it all the way to the bottom. So hold down the control key. That creates one. And because it's gradient, it already has like a natural little thing of separation, so you might not have too much to do with anything in terms of getting it to look, you know, differently. Alright, so now we just adjust our camera positioning again. And we may end up with something that looks like this. You'll have to play around with it to get, you know, best results. Let's see here. We'll play around with the brightness. And we end up with something that looks kind of like that. You can be as extreme as you want to be, or as subtle as you want to be. And of course, if you really want a lot of variety, then obviously, you know, you probably should make more than one prop, you know, with different types of waves. In this case, I'm basically just using a single prop, and I'm trying to get away with that. But obviously, if you're, you know, you just want the extra variety, then, you know, there's nothing stopping you from using, going in there and creating your own, like, maybe 4 or 5 different types of wave patterns that you can mix and match. Okay, so that's a little bit of extreme right now. The colors kind of, you know, they're kind of like blending in a little too well as far as that foam color. It's a little bit distracting, but you can see where it's going with the waves mixed in together with the colors and stuff like that. So it's not in a bad place. A couple things that you can do additionally. You're going to select everything, duplicate it just slightly if we can. There it is. Alright, and these we're going to make brighter. I don't think it'll let me do all of them at the same time, will it? Yes, it does. So now we created a little outline, okay? The second group has basically been made like into an outline. So, oops, what did I do? I kind of screwed it up by doing this in the middle of the thing. I'm going to delete and come back. So let's try it again, but this time, you know, we'll do it on frame 1. Go back, select everything, duplicate, and just push back a little bit. And I kind of lost my place. I'll do it again. Just push it back a little bit. Okay, maybe make it a little bit larger too, or go up a little bit, just so it's up there, you know. And these we're gonna make a little brighter, all 4 of those. See, by making them brighter, because they're immediately behind each respective wave, we've created an outline. So now you have a little bit more of a separation between each layer, or each major layer there. The thing about these layers too is that you can, let's see if I can find some kind of object. Just for grins, we're gonna drop this in here. Here's a cup. This might work out just fine. So I'm not gonna try to be all perfect with this animation, okay? That's not the whole point of this. This is just so you can have some kind of visualization. Okay, you do whatever you want. I mean, maybe even like cut out this thing and put some ripples there. I just want you to kind of see how an object would interact. In 3D space. So, you know, you just kind of add some random bobbing up and down. I'm not even trying to be accurate, you know. Use your own imagination for this part, okay? This is not what the tutorial is about, but I just want you to kind of get an idea for the interactions and, you know, what you can do. You know, in fact, I don't even like it being all the way back here. I'm going to leave it behind this layer. because it's a little distracting. I'm getting all sidetracked at this point. I was trying to avoid that. Okay, so, you know, this is kind of how your animation would interact. Notice now, at this point, my animation, as I'm working, is running at 19.80 frames per second. So the more crap I add to my stage, the slower it's going to be. So those are the kind of things that you have to keep in mind, all right? I'm adding more effects, I'm adding more things. It does get the system a little bit bogged down, and of course, if you're going to be having characters and all sorts of things, you know, it's things that you're going to be dealing with. Obviously, once I render this, it's going to be rendered at the actual frame rate. So those are things that you got to keep in mind, which is why you have to keep your things optimized. If I get rid of that cup, see, we go back to having a pretty decent frame rate, you know, anywhere between 18 and 29, 30, 32 frames per second. So it's not so much the waves that we've been creating. That one cup was really badly designed. Whoever designed that did not take the time to optimize it, and it basically bogs down our system, just having the cup on the screen. So as far as sprites are concerned, if you want to further enhance, I mean, going forward, you can try, you know, with your artwork, doing additional things, you know. And some things may or may not be fully supported by CrazyTalk Animator. You'll just have to experiment with what is and what isn't. Okay, so I'm going to place this right there. We're going to go back here a little bit. I'm flipping that one on purpose. Alright, so if we use our scene manager, the further away something is, the darker we'll make it. Or vice versa, it depends. Maybe the sun is in the back and like usually is. Maybe you want to make the back one a brighter part portion. That's an idea. I think I'm going to go with this style. Hit play. Got something that looks like that. Let's play around with the camera. Let's stick to maybe just like 1,000 frames, just half as much, so that on this frame you zoom in a little bit. And of course we can create that separation that we did earlier by duplicating everything and just making it slightly offset. And making those just slightly brighter, just to create a little bit of a outline. That should be good enough. So use your best creative judgment as to how you draw these things. I mean, there's all sorts of layering and options and things that you can do. This is only scratching the surface. I mean, you can do additional waves and different types of ripple effects and foam that kind of splashes in and out. But hopefully this gives you a great starting point for creating your own waves. Let's see here if so here's a more simplified one that I made that kind of gets the point across. You know, more simple shapes. Don't go overboard with the complexity. Don't try to be perfect. You know, the easier, the simpler, the least amount of shapes you use, the more convincing this type of effect should be. And once you actually start adding stuff to your program, I mean to your scene, you're going to notice that it takes away a lot of the attention. Okay, it don't focus so much on what the waves themselves look like. Once you start adding things to your project, it's going to look great. It's going to draw away the attention from the waves themselves, and it's going to allow the user, the viewer, to fill in the blanks, and it'll just make everything look a lot better once everything is put together. So don't worry if, like, by itself the waves don't look quite right. It's all gonna come together once you here's a demo of like the waves by themselves. I mean, they look like waves, they look okay, but once you start adding stuff into the scene, then everything kind of looks a little bit more natural, just by the way that the main object on the scene is bringing it in. So yeah, play around with it. Hopefully this helps, and if you have any questions, you know, send them my way. Okay, so if you haven't subscribed to my channel, be sure to subscribe to it. If you want to keep track of when I go live or when I have a new video, hit the bell icon, and you'll be the first to know. So other than that, you know, if you want to keep track of where I'm at, go to toontitan.com. A lot of the things that I build and stuff are available to download or to buy from there. So go to toontitan.com, subscribe to the channel, all that good stuff. If you have any other questions for me, you know, just post them in the comments below.